Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking time to join us at this webinar. My name is Willem Koops. I'm Research Coordinator at Zuivel NL, or in English, Dutch Dairy NL. This is an umbrella organization of the Dutch dairy sector. Tonight's webinar is about ammonia reduction in dairy farming practice. And our presenter today is Rudie Freriks. He is a Dutch dairy farmer. But before we start, this webinar is being delivered by EuroDairy. This international network aims to exchange knowledge and innovation between farmers in Europe. You can find more about EuroDairy at our website, www.eurodairy.eu. Also, I would like to mention that this webinar will be recorded and will be available to watch back on the EuroDairy website, like other webinars. You will stay out muted throughout the webinar, but if anyone would like to ask questions, then please type your questions into the box on your screen. You can see that, I think, on the right side. Okay, now we start with an overview. The overview of this evening webinar. First, I will present two slides about the development of ammonia emission in the Netherlands and our legislation. And then Rudie will tell about his experience with reducing ammonia emission on his farm. And then afterwards, you can ask all questions you want. As I told, you use the box, and we will ask the questions to Rudie. So now I start with the Dutch ammonia legislation. In the Netherlands, we have, let's say, already maybe 30 years, we have legislation to reduce the ammonia emissions from livestock farms. The regulation is, let's say, for a part is area specific. That means that near sensitive areas like Nature 2000, and Rudie is also living near sensitive areas, or maybe he tells more about it, then there are extra regulations and to reduce ammonia. But besides area specific, we have also general legislation. And the general legislation, you can say that is relating to the housing and the manure storage, or the slurry storage outside the farm. First of all, when you build a new barn or you extend your barn, then there are limits about the ammonia emission per cow place. So that means in practice that you have to reduce the ammonia emission much more before you get a permit to build. There's also an obligation that you have to cover the liquid storage when it's, of course, not under the stable but outside. Besides housing and storage, there are also regulations regarding the applications of the liquid manure. That means that you have to use low emission techniques. As you can see on the picture, that I assume the mest is injected in the ground. Last but not least, there are also possibilities to reduce ammonia emission by feed and herd management. But I will not go into that because Rudie will tell about his experience on his farm with this issue. So now the next slide is about the development of the ammonia emission in the Netherlands. As you can see that since the 90s, there is a strong reduction in ammonia emission. This is the ammonia emission by cattle. So cattle is more than cows, but in the Netherlands, far most of cattle is relating to dairy cows. We have only a little cattle for meat production. So you can see a strong reduction the first 10, 15 years, then almost 70% reduction. Then there was a slower reduction for a couple of years. I think the first strong reduction is like always the low-hanging fruit, and in this case it was also mainly the manure application, the regulation which reduced the manure, which reduced the ammonia emission a lot. You see also the last couple of years there's a little increase in ammonia emission. How come? Well, that is related to the dairy quota system. Before the abolition, there was also yearly a little increase. But with the finish of the quota system, in our view, dairy farmers started to increase their herds. So there was a strong growth in the number of cows, starting maybe in 2013. So that explains the reduction in the last years. We do not have the figures for 2017, 2018, but one thing is sure, then there will be again a strong reduction as the number of cows in the Netherlands reduced more than 7% the last 2 years due to another environmental problem we have, and that's phosphate sealing. So you don't see the figures of 2017 and 18, but they will be lower than 2016. So this gives an impression how we reduced the ammonia emission in the Netherlands. You can see the different colors. You can see the part which is related to the housing and the storage. And you can also see the grazing. And then what I said in the beginning, that the manure application is let's say, the strongest part of the reduction. But not in this graph is that also doing things on the ratio for the feed and herd management can also reduce. But as I said, that will come by Rudie. So that gives you some background, and now it's up to Rudie to explain how it works on his farm to reduce ammonia emission and his experience. So Rudie, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Willem. Good evening, listeners. Willem, thanks for the introduction. I will try to explain what I did last couple of years on my farm. First, introducing my farm and myself. You see here a photo of my farm, and this one is another photo from out of a plane. Here is our house. This is the cubicle barn for the cows, milking parlor. This one here is a deep litter barn for housing the dry cows. And here we have our young stock until from birth till about the age of 16 months. Well, this is a photo from me and my wife. I'm Rudie, 53 years old, married with Petra, and we have 2 children. A son of 18 who says he wants to take over our farm, and a daughter of 15 years. And this is an overview of our paddocks. Here is the farm. You see our fields are crossed with a few public roads, which, grazing cows is not as easy in here as it is directly behind the barn. But I do graze the cows on all these paddocks. I've got a few numbers here about our farm. At this moment, we have 80 cows, 35 young stock, totally 37 hectares of land with here grass and maize. The production annually is over 700,000 kilos of milk. The soil is sand, more coarse sand to loamy sand, which also gives an idea about what's the ability to produce grass and maize on the field. The milking parlor is a double 7 herringbone. I do graze the cows, but it's only limited, which means I graze them only during daytime. That means maximum 8 hours per day. So the grass intake will be about 8 to 9 kilogram dry matter per cow. And I'm quite intensive, so unlimited grazing is not a possibility for me, and it doesn't fit into my system. And here you see a photo of the housing of the dry cows. So cows are housed in a traditional cubicle barn. It's not a low emission barn, just a traditional. Slurry is stored in a pit under slats. And it wasn't necessary for me yet to build a low emission barn. Spreading slurry, well, Willem showed the same photo, and you see here the slurry is injected into the sod. Now I'll tell you about the field lab Natura 2000 in our province Overijssel. It started because ammonium was becoming a problem for getting a legislation or a permit to build new barns. And we saw that the development perspective for farmers was not very good. We wanted to get more space to develop our farms, and not only by the legislating of barns, but there's also ammonium emission. Well, it can also be reduced with management measures. And well, Natura 2000 goals, you all know the European policy on preservation of nature, and one of the main problems in the Netherlands is the deposition of ammonium on the Natura 2000 areas. So if you can reduce it by management measures, I don't have to invest in my old barn, but still get the goals which are meant to be for the Natura 2000 areas. So here it is in my own words. The project was from 2011 till 2015. The mission was preventing emission by ammonia by management measures, and also creating accepted tools for farmers. You can take management measures, but the government has to accept them as being good tools and have a permit for it to still, to stay in business as a farmer. And another objective was I still want to earn a good income with my farm. Now you see here is an overview. If you want to prevent ammonium emission, you have to know where it, what are the sources of ammonia. And I will take a little time to explain this. First, you have a ration which you feed to your stock, cattle, pigs, poultry. Well, tonight it is cattle. What you feed your cows with has an effect on how much ammonium can be emitted. What you don't put in a cow, it can't get out. That's the idea. The stock eats the ration. They also produce, there's a nitrogen excretion on urine and manure. If the cows are housed, the nitrogen excretion will be in the barn. And in my case, it's under the slab floor. The slurry is being held. Ammonium will be emitted from the barn. If you have a slurry pit outside the barn, there also can escape ammonium. And then what are you doing with the manure and muck, the slurry? Is also where you applicate it, there will also be a source of ammonia. If you put it on grassland, even if you have low emission techniques, there still will be ammonium emission, also on arable land. Fertilizer gives a slight ammonium emission. Grazing cows, well, the nitrogen excretion will be on the field, so there will also be a little bit ammonium emission. This all together are the sources of ammonium. So if you know where the sources are, you know where to take your measures. Willem already told about the legislation. That's the government. It's mostly focused on barn and the slurry pit. These two are, if you want a permit to be a farmer or to extend your farm, the focus is on these two issues. But we have also seen in the overview that only the half of the ammonium emission is from the barn and the slurry pit. The rest is from what happens on the field. And that is where I come in. I can take measures on the ration, but also on the fields to even try to reduce even reduce more the ammonium emission. And now I will show you what we started with in 2011 and then go through what measures we took. In 2011, I had 86 cows and a lot more young stock compared to the number of cows. The area was the same. The milk production was a little less than it is today. Soil was, of course, the rest of the farm is the same. And you see here the ammonium emission from total farm, 2,891 kilos. And we decided, well, how can you compare different farms? Because there were 8 farmers joining in this project. How can you compare the different farms? We decided we express the ammonium emission per 1,000 kilo milk. You could also choose the ammonium emission per cow or per hectare of land. But we thought, well, this is a good comparison. So 3.93 kilos per 1,000 kilo milk. This project was being supported by the Wageningen University. And well, I gave them a rough idea of what kind of management measures I was thinking of. And they were calculating it, what ammonium reduction was potential. One of the measurements I wanted to take was a higher age of the dairy cows with half a year, which means less young cattle. And older cows produce more easily the milk. It's more efficient to have cows of an older age, which was a potential reduction of 5%. The second is the ratio of protein and energy in your ration. If you have more energy with the same protein, well, the ratio is more efficient, and you will, I should be able to gain another 5%. The third point was, the ration for the young cattle. We were used, we make silage all through the year, and especially in autumn, the silage has less energy, more protein, and it's not as tasty as the first cut. Well, the dairy cows produce milk, so they get the best quality, and the young cattle, well, they get the autumn silage, but it contains 18% of protein, and young cattle of a year until they calve first time only need 13%. So that there is a potential loss. Well, it could reduce 2% on the whole farm, not much. And a fourth issue on my farm was improving productivity of grassland, but that was because 2011 was a dramatic year for grass production on my farm. I only had 7 tons of dry matter per hectare. The spring was very dry. The summer was very, very, very wet. So I had a big issue just to stay farmer. Well, in ammonium reduction, it doesn't help a little bit, but it was a goal I had to take to stay farmer. Total calculated effect, 12%. We also get an advisor. Each farmer had his own advisor, and you have to make a strategy. What are we going to do? Well, first of all, it was search for good daily indicators. If you take measures, you want to know, does it work? And of course, we have management programs. We have loads and loads of data, but most programs given, you can look back, it's an annual basis. And when the year is finished, you know, have I done it right or wrong? We have now the annual nutrient cycle assessment. And it gives an overview of the different kinds of nutrients, how efficient you are, but only when the year is finished, I know, did I do it right this year or not? And I want to know it earlier. So that was a thing. Well, how can you have a good indicator? Of course, improving feed efficiency. all the livestock, but also the efficiency of how much dry matter does a cow need to produce 1 kilo of milk. Changing composition of the ration, the balance between energy and protein could be sharpened. Because 2011 was a dramatic year for silage production, well, I had to have some feed for my dry cows and yearlings. Well, one option is to put them on straw and concentrates. It can be very effective. You give them exact what they need and nothing more. And well, the dry cows and yearlings can do very well on it. And we had to set a target for how much ammonium you think to reduce. Well, we didn't have an idea, so we thought, well, let's say 20%. As an indicator, I chose urea in milk as a day-to-day indicator because, well, here it stands. Urea in milk is an indicator of nitrogen utilization by the cows. And every bulk tank delivery in the Netherlands, the urea content is just like fat and protein is determined. So 2 days after the delivery of a bulk tank, I know the amount of fat, protein, and also urea. And well, because you get it each and every day, you can set a goal on it. And the urea in combination with protein gives me an idea of how are the cows doing well. If the protein is low and the urea is high, there is not enough energy in the ration. And if the protein is very high, but the urea is too low, in a way I look at it, well, then there is not enough protein in the ration, so there should be more possible. As you can see, in 2012 compared to 2011, the same amount of milk, fat content just the same, protein the same. I did have an effort on urea, but the ammonia emission in kilogram per ton milk was going from, instead of going down, it was going up. And then you have to look, well, what have I done? What have we done? Where did it go wrong? And then you have to take a deep dive in all the data you collected. Well, I'm not showing all the data in here because our data, the way we express energy will be different than in your country. But one of the things was the amount of protein in the urea in relation to the energy was going the wrong way. I used too much protein. Even though the urea in the milk was going down, the ammonium was going up. So what do you do? Well, try to get even better silage than we had, which meant my efforts on producing grass and maize should go up. And we start with working out a fertilization plan, a manuring plan. We are obliged to make a plan, a manuring plan every year, but it's an overall plan which says, well, how much manure are you producing on your farm? What's the area of grass and maize you have? And if you have a surplus, well, you're allowed to use an amount of slurry on your grassland and maize. And well, what's left over, you should transport to an arable farmer. But you can, well, that's just this. But what I started to do was working it out per paddock. In what way am I using the paddock? Is it for grazing the cows? Is it for silage? That makes a difference. And also making a plan throughout the season. What am I doing the first cut? What am I doing the second cut? What am I doing through the summer and into the autumn? And I decided, well, in 2012, I was too enthusiastic. All the slurry and all the fertilizer I already used up at the end of June, and I was not allowed to use any more. That's halfway through the season, so I didn't have anything left in the autumn. So a little less in spring, spreading it more, a little less fertilized in spring, spreading it a little bit more over the season to try to get a good silage with a good energy and protein balance throughout the year. No extremes in it. So when you don't have an extreme silage with high energy and low protein, or low protein and high, low energy and high protein, then you don't have to correct that much. If it has same quality throughout the year, you don't have to make too many corrections. And that's the third bullet, the ration. I have an amount of silage, grass silage. I have an amount of maize silage, and corrections can be made with, well, with straw or with beet pulp, sugar beet pulp, or with concentrates. And I had to put more focus on the crude protein in concentrate. So I made a plan with my feed advisor. I said, well, that's my goal for crude protein for the whole livestock, and it's up to you to help me for aiming to that goal and to reaching that goal. So all the different components of feed with fast energy, slow energy, fast protein, and slow working protein. It's up to him to make the good balance, but I set the goal. That's the amount I wanted to go to 15% of protein. And another thing, in 2011, I started, in 2012, I started with grazing after the first cut. The whole first cut was silaged. And in 2013, I started at the beginning of April with grazing cows. And grazing cows give less ammonium than feeding them, keeping them in the barn. So you see here the result. In 2013, I also had increased my livestock. I had more cows, up to 96 cows, there's 10 cows more. So that's an explanation for the increase in milk production. Fat is quite the same. Protein a little bit less. Urea exact the same, but a great improvement on ammonium emission. So the use of crude protein as in ration as a critical performance indicator did work out. And that's a good lesson for me. The good taking the good indicator was is in my farm crude protein, and I still use urea as a day-to-day warning indicator, just as I explained a couple of slides before. The level of urea in comparison with the level of protein gives me a good idea, am I doing it efficient or not? And I learned, well, the amount of urea should be somewhere between 15 and 20. If it comes below 15, and I had I had a month where the urea was dropping down to 11, 10, then you see the cows won't produce that much milk anymore, and the level of protein will also drop down. So, 15 is very sharp, and 20, if you get above 20, you are losing something. You're losing nitrogen. And as one of my advisors said, nitrogen is very good, but you only get paid for it when it is become protein in milk, when it has become white. And then the strategy in 2014, well, you see, every time you see measuring, collecting data, that's for a couple of things. I am a farmer who likes to collect a lot of data to know what I am doing, to make a good analysis, what works, and it gives an opportunity to make a good evaluation, but it's also necessary for the government. We have to prove that the measures we take are able to be controlled and are able to be legislated. So still investing in feed production. 2014, very literally, I reseeded 1/3 of my grassland, keeping even more focus on crude protein. In well, here stands 15%. I started with 16, well, a little above 16% in 2011. In 2013, I had 15.5%. Well, it should be even more sharp. And theoretically, with 14%, cows still can produce a lot of milk. But if you, well, it's too ambitious for me, because then every detail has to be controlled and must fit every little detail in energy and protein. So 15% should be able for a practical farmer, but it's very ambitious. You don't have any margin for making mistakes. And still an efficient livestock. Fertility in the Netherlands, the time between two calvings is up to more than 400 days, say 13, 14 months. Well, if you bring it back to a year, 12 months, you cut out the last month of the production, which is the least efficient. And less young cattle. Young cattle, you need them to replace your cows, but the less you have, the less you, growing young cattle is not very efficient. Here you see an overview graphically. This is the total amount of ammonia emission on the whole farm in the year 2011, an increase in 2012, 2013 more cows, less ammonium, and in 2014 I had the same amount of cows as in 2011, and you see a reduction. And here it is in the ammonium emission in kilogram per ton per 1,000 kilo milk, what I showed you, and it's just about, well, I almost reached the goal of 20% decrease of ammonium emission. Here it is in numbers. In 2014, I had 86 cows. In 2013, I had 96 cows. So you see cows that produce a lot more milk. Fat is a little lower, protein even a little higher than in 2013. Urea is still sharp, but the ammonium in kilogram per ton milk has dropped to 3.32. And besides being efficient and all that, because we express the ammonium in kilograms per ton milk, the level of milk production also affects on this number, on this figure, because the same kilograms of ammonium a cow produces is now spread over more milk. So that's also a little bit of the explanation of how much it did drop. And my grazing system is being improved. I also joined a project which is called Amazing Grazing, and it was the first project in 30 years in the Netherlands to improve grazing systems. And I joined in because I thought, well, there should be much more possible. We also have a look at the economic effects. The first bars are the legislation, the low emission housing. If you don't do anything else, you are obliged to have sometimes, well, at any time to invest in a low emission housing. This is the yearly costs of investing in low emission housing, and this is the effect in changing in ammonia emission. So yes, it is effective, but it's also expensive. Here you see the same, well, bars in reduce in youngstock. Instead of, if you reduce your youngstock from 6 youngstock per 10 cows to 5, and you have an extra income. It's a plus in your income, and the ammonium emission will drop a little bit. Apply slurry only until July, the half of July. Well, that's the focus on more effective application of your slurry, because it takes some time before the slurry, the nitrogen in the slurry is taken in by the grass, and before the grass grows on it. If you apply slurry in the autumn, you have a greater loss. Well, it doesn't affect that much. Decrease of less crude protein in concentrate. Well, it depends on the rest of your ration, but it's profitable, and it also, in my case, is good for reducing ammonia emission. The measure I took heifers and dry cows only on straw and concentrate. It's very expensive. I was very much advised not to do this. It is also a little bit effective in ammonia, but I still, the dry cows, I never stopped with them with feeding straw and concentrates, because it's a very easy system. It just fits on my farm. I don't produce enough roughage for my cattle, so I have to buy it in. And straw is very easy. You put a big bale before the feed gate, and if it is one cow, or if there are 20 dry cows, one cow does take a longer time, but the straw is still fresh, and she will eat it, and it's very healthy for the cows. So I don't think my income will drop that much. And another one was more heavy cuts for silaging, up to 4,000 kilogram dry matter per hectare net cut. Well, I've done it a year, but I saw that the sort quality was decreasing. So I'm going back to cuts of 3,000 kilogram, and that's better in my farm. And here you see day and night grazing instead of my limited grazing. Well, it is a surplus income, and also a change in ammonia emission. And that's because, when you are grazing the cows, the manure and the urine are rarely dropped at the same place, and you only get ammonium emission when manure and slurry, or manure and urine are coming together. Then you have ammonium emission. So in our housing, where with slurry on the slat floor, that's a great source of ammonium. Challenges. Well, one of the things I said in the beginning was day-to-day indicators. We have developed a new monitoring instrument. That's what we call a navigator, which gives us every day you can fill it in with your data. But normally I could fill it in the first of every month. Fill in the milk production, what did I feed the cows, and it gives me an overview, a very good overview. How much, am I still going steady on course? How is the ration of the total stock developing? What am I doing on ammonium emission? Crude protein in ration is always a challenge. The ratio between energy and protein, you have to stay steadily focused. How sharp can you put it and still being productive with your cows? It's it's every day it's a challenge to do the right thing. Raising grass production is a continuous challenge just to stay farmer. Less young cattle. It's very easy to keep a calf, a heifer calf, from a cow which produces good, but it's very hard to keep. It was quite a challenge to reduce my number of young cattle. Surviving the low milk price that was in the years 2015 and 16, and a constant focus on possible improvement. There are also some traps. If you have an assessment on a 1-year basis, yes, you can have a sharp goal for 1 year, but the next year you still have to be farmer, and I still want to be farmer for several years. So 1-year basis is too short. Another thing, it also has to do with the number 2. The silage stock of this year will influence the next year. So if I have a good result, I have to take a close look. Is it because of the silage of last year, or is it because of the measures I took this year? And this year, the silage I made this year will mostly be fed next year until May. And so it does have a great influence. The third is managing on good indicator. I started with urea, now I'm focusing on protein, and I'm still going further, so it's now the balance between protein and energy. But every farmer has, well, its own indicator, because every farmer has his own system of farming. So you have to take a good look for what indicator works for me. Silage quality always affects the result. Good quality of silage is always profitable. And practicing your skills takes time. It's not very hard to change the way you work, but to keep up with this, the change work is very hard. You easily drop back in your old way of working, and it just takes time to practice yourself. Also, the herd needs to be practiced, because, well, you change some things in your management, and the herd react in a way, and it takes some time before, well, things are balanced and it's working all right. Conclusions: good results are possible. Measuring, but also the right data and analyzing them. Old cows, few youngsters. Old cows produce more easily more milk than a heifer. Manuring and fertilizing with plan. Good quality grass, good quality maize, good quality silage. More grazing is less ammonia. And are there any questions? I hope I made myself understood. I hope my English wasn't too bad.
Okay, thank you, Rudie, for your clear explanation. You were your English, I think, was very good, and also you made it very clear which measures you took at your farm, and you explained. As I said in the beginning, that everyone who wants to ask questions, you can use the box at the right, and then you can type in the questions, and then we will ask the questions to Rudie. Well, the first one is not a question, but a remark. He said it was good. When we are waiting for the questions, maybe I could start with a question. Rudie, you made it very clear what you did between, let's say, 2012 or 2011 and 2014, and which measures you took and how it worked. But we are now in 2018. Do you have more experience the last couple of years, which maybe are useful to exchange? Or
well, one of the things is ammonium isn't much in the focus right now. For farmers, it's very easy. If you have a low emission barn, you have your permit to keep that number of cows. That's just it. And government, well, there is now more focus on phosphate and on greenhouse gases. So ammonium is a little bit out of picture. And that's one of the things. Well, I'm still at the same level as I was in the year 2014. And it's also to do with how things work. If I am setting myself into if I have put much effort in it and have good results, and suppose 2018 will be referenced as, well, this is a start, and every farmer is obliged to reduce his ammonium production on his farm, compared with the year 2018, I'm already taking so much measures before and other farmers didn't. So it's also to protect myself. Well, you can go a little bit ahead of the herd, but not too far.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine, because you already did a lot of reduction. So, but you say you were about at the same level.
Yes, in kilograms per. Yeah, I'm quite at the same level. It's not totally out of focus. I'm still interested in it, and I'm looking at some new developments. Well, one of the things which is gets more and more popular is adding water at slurry.
Yeah,
that's one of the measures which is also. If you add more water in your slurry, the ammonia emission when you apply the slurry on your field will decrease. And we can say the ammonium is more or less drowned in the water. Ammonium cannot emit that easily from slurry, and especially during the first application of slurry in February, March doesn't emit that much because the temperature is quite low. But when March, April, May, if you apply slurry to your field, the temperature is a little bit higher, and the temperature is one of the things which affects the higher temperature, the more easily ammonium emits from slurry. If you add some extra water, it's also, well, the grass can work better with the slurry, because it's more easily for the grass to take in the nitrogen, and you have less ammonium emission. So this is one of the things which is coming into favor for farmers more and more.
Yeah, I know there's a new development in the Netherlands about adding water. We have a lot of questions now, so okay. I will ask the first question from William Waterfield. Thank you very much. You're now grazing day and night, and if so, for how many days in the year you're doing that?
I'm not grazing day and night. I did improve in the number of days. In 2012, it was about, let's say, 140 days. And well, this year it is, I think, up to 200 days in this year that I did graze my cows. And 2014 was an excellent year. I had 210 days. Yes. So that's the answer. In the amount of hours, that was quite much, and also 8 hours per day. Okay. So it's more the length of the season which varies than grazing day and night, because I have to cross the public roads with my cattle, with my herd, and so this takes too much labor, in my opinion.
Okay, so
I have to take them to the field 2 times a day and get them out. So that I think that's a little bit too much for me, and I'm quite with 19,000 kilos of milk per hectare. I am too intensive for fully grazing.
Okay, so that's why it's a little bit limited, but still a lot of days you are grazing.
Yeah.
A question of Mike Timmerman. Did you have problems with the many old cows, or is there no problems with the strategy? Because you told that you had older cows, more older cows. So
yes, well, that's one of the things I try to achieve. It's a goal which is very hard to get to. You can look at it in a couple of ways. One thing is because you substitute some 30% of your cows, you need that much that great number of young stock. And I think if you don't have that many young cattle to substitute your cows, you are obliged to keep your cows longer. And for me, it does work. So yes, older cows need more care. You have to, it is one of the things you have to practice yourself into. And and now I am at the point I think, well, slowly but surely I'm achieving that goal. I started with, well, I had years with 35% of substitution. The first goal at 30%. Then you, well, if you have done that 2 years, then you go to 25. And so slowly but surely you have to practice yourself and to keep your total farm in balance. But slowly but surely you have to set goal, and you have to also, that's one thing I could advise anyone. Every farmer has his advisors. Make an appointment with your advisors. This is my goal. I want to set that goal, and you are going to help me. And at the end of the year, we'll make an evaluation. Did we achieve the goal? Why not? Why yes? And where did it go wrong? And if the advisor makes his mistakes, well, he is responsible for helping me with that goal. It does help.
I think it's a very good remark about working together on goals with your advisors. Yeah, sorry, I go on because I see a lot of questions coming up. Here, David Litt asked, could you describe the change to the buildings that are required for some farmers? I think he mentioned, let's say, our legislation about when you build a new farm or you extend your farm, you have to reduce the ammonia emission. Maybe you can, little explanation.
Most of the changes are the flooring. I have the traditional slats, and most floorings are now slats with rubber on top, with a valve, so that well, the slurry or the manure can fall through the valve into the slat, and then the valve closes again. So there will be no emission from the pit underneath the floor. There are also barns with no pit under the barn, but the slurry pit is outside the barn and have a rooftop, a roof on top of the slurry pit outside the barn. That's the most, well, that's what you have to think of. And those floors are 2 or 3 times the price of a traditional slat floor. So it's quite expensive, but that's and the government, well, those floors are tested and legislated, and it's very easy for the government to control it, because this floor is on you can see the floor or not. And in well, if you ask a permit, you have to fill in the forms, and you fill in what kind of floor you have. It's very easily to control for the government. Does the farmer use that the good kind of flooring? And most floors are also with scrapers on it, so the slurry and urine are removed very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, that
that's
to separate the urine and the manure as soon as possible. So some regulations also that you have to scrape every 2 hours or something like that.
Yes.
Okay. Now I have a question from Sean Cup about New Zealand. I don't know if I understand it very good, but he asked you, Rudie, have you looked at the studies that have been done in New Zealand with narrow leaf plantain? It's not clear for me. I don't know if you do. You understand?
We have looked at several things. I don't know this term, but as I said, Wageningen University was also a partner of this project, and they were able to gather all the knowledge which was available. The narrow leaf, I don't know what is.
I suggest, Sean Cup, that we will answer your question by email after this broadcasting, so we can have a look what you exactly mean. I hope it's okay. So we will answer your question by email.
Well, we have looked at the different kinds of things. We have looked at some, adding acid to the slurry. We have looked at, some enzymes or that kind of things. And we have looked, so some things are really, as farmer, every farmer has his own goal and his own interest. I am choosing for these measures, and another farm was doing more with adding water, etc.
Yeah. But we will come back about this question.
Okay.
Another question from Andrew Russell. Did you make changes to the grass composition when you sowed pasture? So when you seeded or sowed?
Yes, not well. It did start a little bit. I started with most of ryegrass, and now clover is coming more and more in. And clover is also makes that I don't have to buy in that much fertilizer, so I lowered the amount of fertilizer I used. And now I have reseeded this year a parcel with grass and different kinds of herbs, 3 kinds of clover and some other plants which I don't know the English name of. I'm sorry. So, well, it's just trying and testing. Well, still looking around. What is in favor for me? What is the society asking? One of the things, biodiversity is also an issue. Which making reseeding with herbs and between the grass is one of the things you also do, and maybe it helps me with reducing the amount of fertilizer or reducing ammonium.
Okay. Yeah, in general, I said it before, I think when the person who asks questions have the feeling that they have not given a good answer, then ask it by email afterwards, and then we will come back to it.
Yes.
Now I have a question from a certain person called Ray Keatinge. How big a driver is reduced ammonia emission becoming in favor of more outdoor access? For example, relative to any additional milk price to be obtained through the supply chain?
At this moment, not. But there are a number of demands of the society to us farmers, and Friesland Campina is now working on a program which they call top line, and ammonium emission is one of the issues which is pointed out as well. You have to achieve a bottom level. I think government policy will be more in favor. I see that there will become a pressure on reducing ammonium throughout the whole sector, because we have made an overall agreement with the government, and we didn't get achieved our goals. So I think the government will one day or another react and say, dear farmers, we have a problem. So how are we going to solve that problem? And they are looking at us. But it's not. It doesn't pay out, and not in a way that milk prices are rising. In another way, it can do if you work more efficient with the nitrogen you put into the farm. That can be profitable if it doesn't cost too much, because it's very simple. It's what the advisor told me. You start with nitrogen green in the grass or brown in the slurry, and your goal is to make it white in milk, and that's what pays out. By decreasing the amount of fertilizer I have to buy in, it saves me money. By having needing to grow up less young cattle to a cow, it saves money. So, but you have to have focus, and yes, some measures cost money, so you have to make a balance in it. You have to take a close look, and it takes some years. So you do it step by step, make a good evaluation every year. What did work, what didn't work, and make a good analysis. Save a lot of data, and make a good analysis.
Maybe to add a little remark, in the Netherlands, maybe not everybody knows that in the Netherlands it's quite common that you get a premium for outdoor grazing. It can be €1 or €2 per 100 kilogram, but that is only linked, let's say, to the image of milk or to the welfare, etc. It is not linked to ammonia or something like that. Next question, because we are maybe running a little bit out of time, so I will go to the next question of William Waterfield, who has left. So I suggest that we will answer his question by email.
Okay.
Then Shirley Macmillan, excellent presentation. How is your better grazing management changing the crude protein content of the grazed grass?
It's more balanced. I used to graze the cows 4 or 5 days on a paddock. The first day, the cows eat the very tasty leaves. The second day is not a problem, but day 3, day 4, day 5, they have to eat the rest. And you can imagine it has an effect on your ration, because there is it's a continuous it's too much variety. Now I have smaller paddocks. Cows are at the maximum 2 days on the same parcel, so there is a less variation in the ration. And the cow likes strict habits. Every day the same thing is very much in favor for a cow and very good for your milk production. So the variety in the ration is not as big as it used to be, and that's what makes it profitable for me. I learned a lot about it when I was in Ireland a couple of years ago, and the project of Amazing Grazing. We also had a webinar with someone from New Zealand. So your knowledge on grazing is much more. It's much ahead of us. Okay. I hope this was clear enough.
I hope also. The last question, and before we finish, is also by Mike Timmerman, and maybe you can do it very short, because how many cuts grass did you take in the year? How many times you cut the grass?
Normally 5. This year was very dry, so it was 3.5. But yeah, what do you mean with a cut? If the cows graze, that's also a cut, or is it if it's only silaging? If it was only silaging, it would be 5, and if it's silaging and grazing, then it can be 6. But depends on how you manage it and how often you go grazing on your field. The production is about the maximum production I achieved was 11 tons of dry matter per hectare, and this year I hope it will be somewhere near 10, but I don't think I will reach it.
Okay, I think we have to round up because we are running out of time.
Yes.
Again, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. Also, I want to thank all participants for listening. Yes. I think it was quite an interesting webinar, and as I said, we had a lot of questions. We will afterwards look at the questions. If we did not answer all the questions, or participants have another question, they get opportunity to send them by email afterwards. Yep. So please keep an eye on the EuroDairy website for future webinars. As I said before, this webinar will be recorded and will be available to watch back at the EuroDairy website. So all those who have registration will receive an email alerting you when it's live on the website. Also, I want to thank Suan Howardson from AHDB for making this technical possible. So I would say again, thank you, Rudie, and thank all listeners, and good night to everyone.
Bye. Good night, everyone, and thanks for listening to me.